Russian President Vladimir Putin has announced a slew of measures to prevent an economic meltdown due to the Western sanctions. Putin said that the West's economic rapid attack has failed, calling on Russian citizens to mobilize against economic penalties imposed on them. The Kremlin confirms Russia will increase its public expenditure to override the effects of Western sanctions, with President Putin announcing an increase of all social payments in the near future, claiming that the Russian economy had all necessary resources to solve the long-term tasks. He said that private companies will play a key role in overcoming the economic crisis, promising removal of administrative barriers and maximum entrepreneurial freedom. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov downplayed Russian concerns over the OPEC Plus mechanism, saying Kremlin has no reason to believe that the OPEC Plus mechanism will be dismantled, as no one is interested in it, adding that members support the existing format for new participants.
Мы отметили, кстати сказать, что бегают американцы на эту тему и к Саудовской Аравии, к Эмиратам, к Катару, и по нефти, и по газу. И все вот перечисленные мной страны, равно как и Венесуэла и Иран, четко говорят, что когда будем рассматривать вопросы, связанные с появлением новых участников на рынке нефти, мы все привержены формату ОПЕК+, где на основе консенсуса обсуждаются и согласовываются квоты для каждого участника. И я пока не вижу оснований полагать, что этот механизм будет каким-то образом разрушен. Никто в этом не заинтересован.
Russia's oil supplies are projected to drop by nearly 3 million barrels per day from April as some countries in the world look to move away from dependence on Russian gas and oil. Australia has put an end to export of alumina to Russia in a bid to reduce Russia's aluminium production.
So far, we have imposed 476 sanctions on 443 individuals and 33 entities. The government has imposed an immediate ban on Australian exports of alumina and aluminium ores, including bauxite, to Russia, which will limit its capacity to produce aluminium, which is a critical export for Russia.
Australia has also stepped up support for Ukraine and will donate at least 70,000 tons of thermal coal to keep Ukraine's power generators running. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has allocated an additional $21 million for Ukraine's defense forces, which takes Australia's total defensive support for Ukraine to $91 million. They have also offered $30 million to Ukraine as humanitarian aid. Russian Foreign Ministry accused Italy for joining what Moscow calls anti-Russian hysteria by forgetting the bilateral ties and long relations between the two countries in a second. Moscow said it hoped the retracted French threat of waging economic war on Russia would not find followers in Rome. Italy said it viewed Russia's remarks as a threat and insult, adding that the comments were odious and unacceptable. China has been actively criticizing the biting sanctions imposed by the Western Kremlin. In the latest, a Chinese official called the Western sanctions on Russia as increasingly outrageous. Vice Foreign Minister of China accused the NATO alliance of expansionism and cornering a nuclear power like Russia. For more on this, Maximilian Hess, a fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, is now joining us on this broadcast. Maximilian, thank you for making time and welcome to We On.
Thank you for having me.
What do you make of these sanctions? Could sanctions push Russia into a financial crisis and depression? And is this an effort by Putin to avert the crisis from exploding by, increasing public expenditure?
Yes, sanctions are already going to push Russia into a major economic crisis. Forecasts for its GDP decline range from 15% to even 30%. We're seeing the sanctions still get even more strict. But certainly the major sanction was already enacted, the cutting off of its central bank and therefore Russia from the international dollar system almost 2 weeks ago now. So the Russian economy is going to change significantly. It will no longer really be a market economy because of Putin's responses. So we have to see what will come next. But the Russian economy, as we have known it, is effectively dead, both domestically and for international partners.
Maximilian, Ukraine has urged the West to impose stricter sanctions on Russia to pressure Putin to retreat. But so far, are these sanctions worsening the situation, making Putin more aggressive and simply not working? What's your view on that?
I think the sanctions are certainly very effective, particularly as the Ukrainian forces have been able to hold back the Russian forces much more effectively than had been thought likely. Putin is effectively fighting a war on two fronts now, one against the Ukrainian people who have very close historic, cultural, and linguistic ties with the Russians, and then one on his own rear front because of the collapsing Russian economy there. Russia can continue to wage this war for a significant amount of time, but this will likely have major effects on his regime's stability and his political authority if they remain. So that raises the pressure for him to change his actions in Ukraine.
Dependence on Russian oil and gas has also proven to be a global issue. What are the viable alternatives for countries which rely on such supplies from Russia, and who will pay the price for isolating Russia?
The whole world will certainly pay a little bit of a price, but the Russian economy is not systemically important to any major G7 country or really to any major emerging country such as India, Brazil, South Africa, or China as well. The cost will be borne around the world. Some countries will have initial shortages or impacts that are likely, but I think it's very important that this be a moment where the world come together. And we saw that in the United Nations vote, where only 4 rogue states voted alongside Russia. And that this can be a moment that, yes, everybody will feel a little bit of pain, but it was unlikely to introduce a major systemic crisis to everybody if we work together. And the principle of standing up against such a wanton unilateral war of aggression, I think, is one that warrants a global response in that way. And so far, there are indications, not every country is on board, but really that this is an unprecedented moment in that. Even Singapore and Switzerland, countries that don't normally align with these agreements, have been on board from very early.
Finally, Mr. Maximilian, if this war continues, what does that say about Russia? What effects will that have on Russia?
Well, we really need to talk about, in the sense of the Russian economy, what is likely to result is a kind of command economy. We've already seen the Russian central bank effectively create its own markets, cut off from the world markets and both its government debt and the ruble. But the reality is, if you go to countries around Russia, you can't sell rubles for anywhere near the official exchange rate. It's far lower. So we're going to see Russia move to a sort of very state-run command economy. That can have some elements of capitalism, as we see in China, but it will be very different from the Russia that we've known over the last 20 years. And then if Putin does continue to wage this war, it really raises questions for the Russian people about why their leader would choose to impoverish the nation at the extent of a war that is, against their historical closest nation, and one that is being fought on false pretenses. So I fear we've seen, once again, a dark curtain cast itself over Russia. And as long as Putin remains, that's very difficult to see that lifting now, sadly.
Maximilian Hess, thank you very much for your time and for talking to us today.
Thank you for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.